The name on the door said Hartwell Development Group. Gold letters, black background, very clean. I stood in the lobby for a moment longer than I needed to, just looking at it. I had seen that name before it existed. I had written it on a napkin at my kitchen table 8 years ago while my son sat across from me. 29 years old and full of ideas he didn't yet know how to fund. The receptionist looked up. She was young, maybe 22, with a headset around her neck and a smile she had clearly been trained to deploy on a timer. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "I'm his father," I said. She looked at her screen. "I don't see a—" "Tell him his father is here. He'll know." She picked up the phone and spoke quietly. There was a pause. Then she set it down and said, "Someone will be right out," in a tone that told me she hadn't been given further instructions and wasn't sure what to do with me. I sat in one of the chairs near the window. The office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Columbus. I could see the river from where I sat. I had driven past this building for years before my son moved in. Before I helped him move in, I should say. That is the more accurate version. I thought about that napkin. I still had it somewhere. My son had drawn a rough sketch of a floor plan and said, "Dad, I just need someone to believe in me." I was 61 years old, 3 years out from retiring early after 32 years as a structural engineer. I had a pension, a paid-off house, and $280,000 in savings I had been building since my wife passed in 2018. I told him I believed in him. Then I wrote him a check for $260,000. That was the beginning. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I did not give my son that money expecting him to worship me. I did not hand him a check and keep a running tab of how much gratitude I was owed. He was my only child. His mother and I had worked for 30 years so that he could have opportunities we didn't. When he came to me with a plan, a real plan, a business model he had researched and revised and brought to a small business consultant, I didn't hesitate. I told him, "Pay me back when you can, and take care of yourself." He did not pay me back. In 7 years, he sent me one payment of $15,000, which he mentioned at Christmas in front of his wife's parents as though it were an act of extraordinary generosity. He said, "We've started paying Dad back." And his mother-in-law said, "How wonderful." And nobody asked about the other $245,000. I didn't say anything that night. I'm not a man who makes scenes. I'm a man who waits. What I did not yet understand was that the waiting was not going to lead anywhere on its own. The business had grown beyond what either of us had imagined. Hartwell Development Group now handled commercial real estate projects across 3 states. My son had 22 employees. He drove a car that cost more than the first house I ever bought. His wife, whom I will call my daughter-in-law because that is her role regardless of how she treats me, came from a family that had money long before my son had any. Her father owned a chain of medical supply distributorships. Her mother sat on 2 nonprofit boards. They were the kind of people who talked about other people's success as though they had predicted it all along. When my son's business crossed the $10 million revenue mark last spring, he decided to celebrate with what he called a milestone gala. He rented the ballroom at the Meridian Hotel downtown. He hired a catering company and a jazz quartet. He sent invitations that looked like they had been designed by someone who charged by the serif. I received mine in the mail. It was addressed to Mr. Raymond Hartwell, which is my name, and I will admit that when I opened it, I felt something warm move through my chest. My son was celebrating something real, something we had built together, even if only I remembered it that way. I pressed my best suit. I polished my shoes. I drove downtown. I gave my name at the door to a young man with a clipboard. He ran his finger down the list, and I watched his face do something subtle, a small recalibration, like a calculator correcting an error. "Hartwell," I said again. "Raymond Hartwell." "Yes, sir, I have you." "Table 17. Table 17, I repeated. "Yes, sir." "Through the main doors, then toward the back left. The staff will direct you." I walked through the main doors. The ballroom was already half full. round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces with white flowers, and warm light. The head table sat on a low riser at the front of the room, facing everyone else. My son stood near it, laughing with a group of men in suits. His wife stood beside him in a green dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her parents sat at the head table, already her father leaning back in his chair like a man reviewing property he owned, her mother speaking to the woman beside her with the focused attention of someone making an impression. I found table 17 in the back left corner, 20 feet from the kitchen doors. The table was set for 8. The other 7 seats were occupied by people I had never met. 2 of my son's junior associates and their spouses, a vendor of some kind, and one woman who introduced herself as the building's property manager and seemed as confused about her placement as I was about mine. "My place card," said Raymond. "Just Raymond. Not Raymond Hartwell. Not Dad. Not Father. Just a first name, in the same font as every other place card in the room. As though I were a colleague someone had felt obligated to include. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin and placed it in my lap. The property manager asked me how I knew the guest of honor, and I said, "He's my son." And she said, "Oh, how lovely," and then looked away quickly in the manner of someone who has walked into something they didn't expect. The program began. There was a welcome from my son's business partner. There were remarks from the mayor's office. There was a video presentation, professionally produced, with music and photographs and testimonials from clients. I watched it from table 17. In the video, there was a section about how Hartwell Development Group began. My son appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like his conference room, speaking directly to the camera. He said, "I started with a vision and a willingness to bet on myself." He said, "The early days were hard, but we believed in what we were building." He said, "I am grateful to everyone who helped make this possible." He did not say my name. He did not say the word father. He did not say anything that would have caused a single person in that room to look toward table 17. Then my son took the microphone. He thanked his wife. He thanked his in-laws by name, his father-in-law specifically, whom he called a mentor and a role model. He thanked his partners. He thanked his staff. He told a story about a difficult project in year 2 that almost broke them, and how he had called his father-in-law at midnight and the man had talked him through it. He did not mention the $260,000. He did not mention the phone calls we had in year 1, when I had talked him through the same kinds of moments, at the same hours, from the same quiet house where I had raised him. He finished his remarks and raised his glass, and the room applauded. And I sat at table 17, and understood something I had been slow to understand. I was not a guest at this event. I was furniture. I did not make a scene. That is not who I am. I finished my meal. I spoke politely with the people at my table. At 9:15 I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked to where my son was standing near the bar with his father-in-law and 2 other men. My son saw me coming. Something moved across his face, not guilt, exactly. More like the expression of a man who has been managing a situation for a long time and is slightly tired of it. "Dad," he said. "I wanted to say congratulations," I said. "It's a beautiful event. Thanks for coming," he said, in the tone you use with a neighbor you've invited out of obligation. I looked at him for a moment. His father-in-law extended his hand and introduced himself. I shook it. Then I looked at my son again and said, quietly, so only he could hear, "We should talk soon. About the loan." He stiffened slightly. "Dad, this isn't the—" "I know," I said. "Not tonight. Soon." I shook his hand the way you shake a business associate's hand. Then I walked out of the Meridian Hotel, got in my car, and sat in the parking garage for a few minutes before I drove home. I want to tell you exactly what I felt, because I think it matters. I didn't feel rage. I know what rage feels like. I've felt it at other moments in my life, the hot behind-the-eyes kind that makes you say things you regret. What I felt that night was something colder and clearer. It felt like the moment in an engineering analysis when you find the flaw in the load-bearing calculation. Everything looks fine until you run the numbers correctly. Then, you see it. I had never put the loan in writing. That was the flaw I had to work around. When I got home, I went to the small filing cabinet in my office and pulled out the folder I had kept since 2017. I am an engineer. I keep records. I had every bank statement showing the wire transfer of $260,000 from my account to my son's business account in 3 installments. I had emails in which my son referred to the money as a loan, his word, not mine, and in which he outlined a repayment plan he had never followed. I had a text message from November 2019 inches which he wrote, "Dad, I promise I will pay you back every dollar. You have my word." I had a birthday card from 2020 inches which he wrote, in his own handwriting, "Thank you for investing in me. I will make you proud and pay you back." I also had the one payment record, $15,000. January 2022. Outstanding, $245,000. The next morning I called a lawyer. Her name is not important, but she was 64 years old, sharp, and had handled cases like mine before. Informal family loans that had gone unpaid, she explained, could be pursued legally when there was sufficient documentation of the loan's nature and the borrower's acknowledgement of it. My documentation, she said after reviewing the folder, was better than most people bring me. She said it would not be simple. She said my son would likely argue it was a gift, that family expectations around money are often ambiguous, and that judges sometimes look unfavorably on parents suing children. I told her I understood all of that. I told her I wanted to proceed. She filed the civil complaint 2 months later. The amount sought, $245,000 plus interest calculated from the date of each transfer at the rate my son's own emails had implied. My son called me the day he was served. I let it go to voicemail. He said, "Dad, what are you doing? Call me back." His voice was tight, controlled. He was using his business voice on me, the one he'd developed after the company started growing. I called him back the next morning. "This is unnecessary," he said, before I had spoken more than a word. "I don't think it is," I said. "I was going to pay you back. You know that. You've had 7 years," I said. "You've sent me one payment. You stood at a podium last month and thanked everyone in your life except the person who funded the first 3 years of that business. I think we're past the point where I take your word for it." There was a silence. "You're really doing this," he said. "I am," I said. Another silence. Then, "I'm going to have to get my own lawyer." "I know," I said. "This is going to cost both of us. You should have thought about that at table 17. I said. Then I ended the call. I want to be honest about the next several months, because they were not easy. My son's attorney was aggressive. He filed motions, arguing that the transfers were gifts, that no formal loan agreement existed, that my son had never been presented with repayment terms or a schedule. He pointed to the fact that I had never sent a written demand for repayment before filing suit. He argued that the $15,000 payment was a gift in return, not a loan repayment. My attorney was better. She had the emails. She had the text message. She had the birthday card. She had 7 years of consistent language, my son's own words, referring to the money as something he owed me, something he intended to repay. The case went to mediation first. My son's attorney proposed a settlement, $80,000. Final. My attorney conveyed the offer. I turned it down. My son's attorney proposed $120,000. I turned that down too. My attorney asked if I was sure. I told her I was sure. The risk, she reminded me, is that a judge may still find in his favor. I understand the risk, I said, but I'm not settling for less than what he owes me. Not because of the money, because of what settling for less would mean. She nodded. I think she understood. We went before a judge in February. The hearing lasted 2 days. My son sat at one table with his attorney. I sat at another with mine. We were in the same room for the first time since the gala. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. I had been sleeping fine. When you've made peace with a decision, the nights get easier. My son testified that the money was a gift, that I had told him to use it for his future, that there had never been a repayment expectation. He was calm on the stand. He had clearly practiced. Then my attorney put into evidence the email from March 2018, in which my son had written, "I know this is a lot to ask, Dad. I'm treating this as a loan and I will structure repayment starting in year 2. She put in the text. She put in the card. She put in 3 additional emails over 4 years, in which my son had referenced the money in terms that only made sense if he understood it to be a debt. The judge was a quiet man in his early 70s with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He reviewed the documents slowly. He asked my son's attorney several questions I will not pretend to fully reconstruct. He asked my attorney one question, which was whether there was any documentation of a gift intention on my part. There was not. The ruling came 12 days later. The judge found in my favor. He awarded $245,000 in principal and a reduced interest figure that brought the total to just over $268,000. He noted in his written decision that the borrower's own communications constituted sufficient acknowledgement of the debt's nature and that the absence of a formal agreement did not negate the obligation where intent could be established through documentation. I read that decision sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I had written the check in 2017. I read it twice. Then I put it in the folder. I did not celebrate. I am not that kind of man. What I felt was something quieter, the satisfaction of a structure that had been assessed correctly, measured accurately, and found sound. My son did not call me after the ruling. His attorney filed a motion to appeal, which was denied 4 months later. The funds were transferred to my account on a Thursday afternoon in October. I went for a walk after I confirmed the transfer. It was a cool day. Leaves on the ground. The sky that particular gray-white it gets in Ohio in the fall. I walked for about an hour. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about my wife. She would have hated all of this. She was a peacemaker by nature. A woman who believed that families found their way back to each other if you gave them enough time and enough grace. She might have been right about some families. I had given this one 7 years of grace. And what it found its way back to was table 17. I thought about what I was going to do with the money. I had not spent the 7 years waiting on that $245,000. I had my pension, my house, my savings. I was not in need, which meant the money was something else now. Not survival, not retirement security, something more like evidence, a record that the transaction had occurred, that the debt had existed, that I had not imagined the whole thing. I decided to use it carefully. Some of it I put into a small fund I set up for a scholarship at the engineering school where I had done my undergraduate degree, for students from working families who were putting themselves through school the way I had. Some of it I used to take the trip to Scotland. I had been postponing for 11 years because something always came up. Some of it I gave to my sister's daughter, who was working 3 jobs and trying to buy her first house, and who had never asked me for anything. None of it went to my son. I want to say something about the word peaceful, because it matters to me. People hear revenge, and they think anger. They think about wanting to hurt someone, wanting them to suffer, wanting to stand over them with a sense of triumph. That was not this. From the night I left the gala to the morning the funds cleared, I did not once feel what I would call anger. What I felt was something more like resolve. The same feeling I had in my working years when I found a miscalculation in a project, not fury at the error. Just a clear-eyed determination to correct it before it became structural damage. My son miscalculated. Not just the money. He miscalculated who his father was. He looked at a 63-year-old man with a quiet life and a modest car, and decided that man would accept whatever arrangement suited the newer, more successful version of the family. He decided that a first name on a place card at a back corner table was an appropriate summary of my contribution to his life. He was wrong. That is all. He was simply wrong. And the court agreed with me. I have not spoken to my son since the phone call after he was served. I have not called him. He has not called me. Which tells me something about the nature of his regret. Whether it is regret about what he did, or regret about what it cost him. Those are not the same thing, and the difference matters. My daughter-in-law sent me a text message 2 weeks after the appeal was denied. It said, "I hope you're satisfied." I read it once and did not respond. I don't know if she wrote it out of hurt or anger or something else. I have thought about her role in all of this less than you might expect. She did not take my money. She married a man who had taken it and decided it was not worth mentioning. That is between her and her conscience. There is a woman in my neighborhood named Dorothy who lost her husband 6 years ago. We have been having dinner together on Friday evenings for the past year and a half. She knows the full story. She is the first person I told, and she listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is a quality I have come to value enormously. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You did the right thing." Not "I'm sorry it came to that," or "Maybe someday you two will reconcile." Just, "You did the right thing." I think about that. I am 64 years old. I live in the same house I have lived in for 27 years. In the spring, I plant tomatoes in the backyard, and they do reasonably well. I watch the Browns lose football games with a patience I have developed over many decades. I drive a car that is 11 years old and runs perfectly well, because it was engineered correctly and maintained consistently, which is how most things last. I gave my son everything I had, not just the money though that was real, and it was significant. And he spent 7 years pretending he had built something from nothing while I sat in the same quiet house and said nothing. I gave him the years before the money too. The Little League games and the science fair projects and the long drives when he was a teenager and needed to talk to someone who wouldn't judge him. I gave him the model of a man who showed up, who kept his word, who did the hard thing quietly. I thought that was the most important thing I could give him. I still think it was. He just wasn't paying attention. My lawyer sent me a note after the appeal was denied. She said it had been an honor to work the case. She said my documentation was the best I've seen from a non-attorney in 20 years of practice, and I took that as the compliment it was intended to be. I sent her flowers and a handwritten note. I believe in acknowledging people who do their work well. That is the whole story. I tell it not because I want sympathy. I have enough. I tell it because I spent a long time thinking that love meant absorbing whatever the people you love decided to do with it. That staying quiet was the same as being generous. That not making a scene was the same as being a good father. I was wrong about all of those things. Being a good father meant writing that check in 2017. It also meant sitting across from a judge in February and saying, with the full weight of 7 years of documentation, "This is what happened, and it was wrong, and I am asking you to correct it." My son built a company worth more than $10 million. I am proud of that. In the distant, factual way that you can be proud of something that no longer has anything to do with you. The building is solid. The load-bearing structure is sound. But I know what was in the foundation, and so does he. And no amount of milestone galas or gold letters on a lobby door changes the engineering. The name on that door says Hartwell Development Group. My name is Raymond Hartwell. I taught him how to carry that name. He just forgot. For a while, who had done the teaching. I have not forgotten anything. I have documentation.